The morning of Saturday, February the 21st. So I was heading to Victoria on Vancouver Island. I remember driving off of the ferry and simply not knowing what to do with myself. I was very, very anxious and scared. This is Sydney, where I would have come off the ferry, and I do remember the drive into Victoria. I set up a tent in the suburbs of Victoria, but I was crying when I did. I actually felt guilty, as I talk about. I was, I was crying that first day, I remember. Then I was actually too scared to be in the tent, and I wanted to just be around people, but I was very isolated and alone and didn't know what to do. So I went to Beacon Hill Park, the city park in Victoria, and I slept right here. I remember this. Right there. I slept right here off of the ocean, and I didn't realize I could actually sleep in my car. I thought the car would have been a burden, and I'd have to sleep in tents and stuff. And then all of a sudden, it dawned on me that I actually could put the seats down, and it was the way that the internals of the car was set up that I could sleep diagonally. So this is actually the Volvo, the make, and you can see you can put the emergency brake down, and I was able to sleep diagonally in the car. So that's how I slept the entire year with this car, figuring it out basically day one. So it was about 4 days in that I started to kind of be like, okay, I can do this. And, I was trying to figure out how to get food, how to feed myself. I remember being right here. This is a parking lot. And I remember being right here in these bushes, having my camping stove and trying to figure out how to make dinner for myself. But I did it. And over a couple of weeks, I got more comfortable, basically hanging out in the area of Victoria. And eventually, I started to hang out in these areas. So this is the city, and I started to kind of move into some of the kind of suburb areas. And basically, I was staying in my car and finding places to sleep, and then hanging out and walking around in the day, and occasionally interacting with people. But these were, but there was a real sense of purposelessness in these first few weeks. I didn't understand what I was doing. So knowing it was initiated by a spiritual experience, I didn't know what to do. So I was going into soup kitchens, and I would interact with homeless people and would try to be spiritual. Not with a spiritual ego, but I was calling them friends, and I was like, "Hey, friend, what's going on?" And try to be a light to these people and try to get them to have some type of sense of self exploration. I was saying, "Have you ever been into your dreams and done dream studies?" And, mainly I did that because I thought that's what created the rising. So I mentioned in the book that I was doing dream studies. And for me, I thought I had gone all the way down in my dream world, that I had discovered something in me. And then combined with the HG book, it created the rising. I didn't really understand it. I thought it was from my in depth study of my own dream world. So I was encouraging these homeless people to, kind of, think about their own subconscious, and that they were more deeper and more powerful than they thought that they were. And that was it. I didn't know what to do. I started spending lots of time in bookstores and libraries. I was looking for all the books about psychology or spirituality or scriptures. And I remember casually reading some kind of channeling new agey books about aliens, trying to figure out if anyone talked about, what had happened to me. At one point, I went back to trying to find out more about HG in the Victoria Library. I pulled out everything I could find on them, but it was obvious in my heart this was done. So they were a weird anomaly in my life to just fire up the rising, and then it was done. They had nothing else for me. So I didn't have any understanding about what the hell they were about and why this happened to me. And so it was left as a mystery. At one point, I walked into an astrologer's office and told him about my experience. He thought it was profound, but never heard anything like it, though he recognized it as a spiritual awakening akin to those in the tales of scriptures, Buddha and such. I only hung out in Victoria for a couple weeks. And I remember I actually had my car over here in this area. and literally slept there, right here. But the romance of it started to pick up because I was like, I wake up here every morning and it was really simple and I wouldn't have to go to work or anything. And I was wandering the parks first thing in the morning. I wasn't talking to a lot of people, some people, but kind of keeping to myself. So one day, I decided I was going to try out an intuitive experiment, something that I could use to tell me what to do or where to go. So first, I tried connecting with my heart. Feel from my heart. That's how I focused on it. Then, before I could think, let my imagination create an arrow on the ground. So I started somewhere in the city, and then I let the arrow be on the sidewalk in front of me. And now there was this arrow pointing the way. And I was like, okay. And then it had me turn. I was like, okay. So I just followed this arrow, walking down the sidewalk. And then at one point, I'm walking down the sidewalk, and the arrow in my imagination, connected to my heart, starts pointing at a storefront as I'm walking up to it. So out of curiosity, I come up to the storefront, and it's a children's bookstore with a display in the window with big words saying metamorphosis with a large picture of a butterfly. Now, I've mentioned this event in both editions of my book, but I completely forgot the HG connection with it. And that's because I blocked it out. Butterflies and metamorphosis were mentioned all over the HG book. And this hit the disturbia of aliens and spirituality when I had this synchronicity. Like, why am I having a spiritual connection with that book? It made no sense to me. Like, it actually kind of scared me. My intuition scared me. That was the state I was getting in with all this content. But I also had a part of me believing I needed that intuition now to survive. So I now presently link that intuition with that dimensional body that they put into me, right? There's a something in me that was intuitive that was working with the environment. And that's the connecting piece with my oversoul, my intuition, and the aliens all combined. It's very weird, kind of like a wacky experiment on the aliens' behalf. And I was having synchronicities about it. So this event touched my soul. It was touching my subconscious and it kept giving meaning. It was about this time that an event happened that I don't mention in the book. One night, trying to bathe in the ocean, I was running into the water and stepped on a pointed rock and punctured my foot. The next day, I had to go to a walk in clinic and receive stitches. As a result, I hung out for a week in Saanich. So this was Victoria, this Victoria area, and I started moving away a little bit and hung out here in the area of Saanich. I hung out in the parking lot of a mall, using crutches to get by while my foot healed. Shockingly, I only needed a week for it to heal when I began walking on it. The doctor himself was amazed at the speed of my recovery, which I attributed to something to do with the rising. This here is the mall I stayed at, and I kept my car up against the forest and I just stayed there overnight. So while on crutches, I went into a bookstore in the mall and a book was on display. It was Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. So I'll dedicate a separate video to Conversations with God because of its significant role in this period of my life while traveling. But this was the beginning of my ownership of it, and I would read and reread this book throughout my travels. But I'll get into that. About 3 or 4 weeks in, I got more comfortable. I felt like the rising was something that I needed to extract or get at. What is this? What is this power that was in me? I wanted to go deep into nature and remove myself from society and remove myself from people and like meditate or something. Just pull this energy out. So I went over to Souk Provincial Park. So this here is Victoria, and I made my way over to Souk. And now I'm on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and it's very rugged and empty and barren. It's a massive park. Here's the park right here, a massive, massive park. And I parked there in the parking lot. And then the hiking trail is like 45 minutes 45 minutes or something like that, 40 minutes to the ocean. And in the middle of the night, I walked out from my car and doing the 40-minute hike. And I recall This is from Souk Park here, and I recall climbing to this, like, over this rock face, along this rock face above the ocean, with waves crashing underneath. And I was holding on to these tree roots, and I was screaming at God in the middle of the night. And I was like, God, what's going on with me? Like, what's going on? What is this? And I'm like trying to understand what had happened to me. Like, what is this? What is happening? And I was trying to see if I could get a reaction. And of course, there was no response. But, it was like I was screaming for my soul. I was trying to figure out what was going on with this mystery. And it blew my brain what had occurred to me, and why did I leave my life, and why was I doing what I was doing now? It didn't make any sense, and seems pretty on edge, to do this event. But at the same time, I had a fearlessness in me, so I was kind of pushing the envelope at times. The Souk potholes are up here. So I left eventually the Souk Park, and I went to the Souk potholes. It's a park deep in the woods, and I camped over there at one point. And I remember washing and bathing myself in the frigid, cold March stream water. Something along the lines of this. This is along the Souk potholes. And, I was living rugged. I had no heat. I had only campfires for heat. It was cold. If it was cold, I was cold. If it rained, I got wet. It was just rugged. I was homeless, and I wasn't interacting with anybody. And I would leave and enter. I would leave on a whim, feeling what to do next. I drove up to Port Renfrew. I recall picking up a hitchhiker. Eventually, I came over here in this way, and camped at Cowichan Lake, in the Cowichan Lake area, for a couple days. And I actually spent time trying to get at this energy, trying to get it out of me. Like, was it a walk in? I didn't understand what had happened. And I didn't, I just didn't understand it. So I meditated in the woods for a couple days, but nothing happened. Nothing transformed me, and I didn't understand what was going on. But there was one bizarre effect that I always remembered. The energy that was in me at that time was beyond my body and my mind. It was beyond my body and my mind. It was something that my body didn't fully understand itself, and was not understanding. Yeah, my body did not understand what this energy was. But then when I came out of the woods, so I spent time trying to meditate on it. When I came out of the woods I went to a gas station. I couldn't speak to the gas attendant. Like, I had trouble forming words. It concerned me at the time, and eventually I quickly focused on talking, and I was fine. But it was weird and concerned me, for what was going on. And so it's just one of those weird events that really stuck with me. Even after, when the memories had come out about this mysterious event, I didn't understand it. But now, understanding that there was a dimensional body in me, there was a thing the entities had put into me, something else in me, it all makes sense. This was the me formed on craft, and it was the intense energy. This is the me formed from the afterlife, beyond my body, and was formed outside my human mind. So there was a feeling of something in me that was intense and beyond my human construct. If I focused on it intensely, it transcended my mind, and I had trouble talking. Literally transcended my brain. But at the time, the unknown element of what was occurring to me just concerned me. After that experience, I quit trying to get this energy out of me, to express it or to transform me. Whatever it was desiring, it felt like I gave it the space to do it, and it didn't happen. I didn't get transformed. So I didn't know what was going on with me at that time. And I just left it. When I made it to Duncan, I did another intense hiking trip along the Cowichan River in the forest, and camped for a couple days. I remember that. And then when I came out from that, I went. I was back in Duncan, and I visited a church, and they invited me to their Bible study at night. I remember the pastor, and I remember the pastor asking us, "Why did God create existence?" And I replied from reading Conversations with God to know itself. And he was taken aback by the answer. I remember that. It's quite interesting. And he liked it, but then gave me but the Bible tells us, that kind of answer. But, this was the type of stuff I was doing, trying to interact with people spiritually. I then came up to Nanaimo, from Duncan, and here is Nanaimo. And I was walking in a park when there was a poster that the community center was hosting a free meditation. When I arrived, it had just finished, but the organizers, who were espousing the meditation practice of some guru of who I still don't remember, met with me afterwards. I explained what I was doing, that I had this God realization, and now I was traveling in the name of God. And they took me very seriously, actually. The group was from Victoria, and they wanted to help me. So I followed them back all the way to Victoria, and I stayed at the apartment of one of the fellows. Naima was up here, and I went all the way back to Victoria. The fellow that I stayed with, he fed me, he gave me a hot shower, he washed my clothes, I slept on the floor. They were very, very nice. So again, this is the type of stuff that was going on with me at the time. But because I had that detachment from humans thing going on in me, associated with the rising, I always never stayed more than one night with someone who helped me out, at least at this period. So the next morning, grateful for their help, I left again, but was back in Victoria. At the time, I was fighting the human need for attachment, living on the edge, not knowing what was going on, but staying positive. But then my struggles would come out in my subconscious and my dreams. So I'm going to talk about one other trauma that was forming at this time. So I parked my car right here in Victoria. And so this is actually the spot. That's it right there. And this is it here. And slept here overnight. And I woke in the middle of the night crying that I couldn't have a mum. Right? It's pretty, just what I was going through at the time. It was really intense, and I was shaken from the dream. So I wanted to do my trauma exercise on it. But, it really was the dance of life. My oversoul holds nothing about it. Being convinced I needed to separate from my family, parents, friends, and society, the loss was a part of the package. It was kind of a grief, actually. I was experiencing a grief, and it took me a while to understand that that's what that was. Grief for the love of friendship and the love of family. And it was hard to move on from it when I didn't really understand what I was moving on to, right? When I didn't quite get what I was supposed to be moving into, I didn't understand how to let go of things. So I think this adds to the traumatic shock, that I didn't have stability or knowing of what I was moving on to. My oversoul presently was like, this is nothing big. my own higher self knew it was happening and fully agreed and said, this was great. It's just all part of the learning and transformation and the learning that I was going through. So when I further reflected on what I was grateful for about this, something interesting came out. The HG message created a stage, a play, and it was perfect for inducing the strength of character the aliens needed to get the right DNA activated just right. And that came out of me when I kind of connected to the elder about it. They knew it was going to be uncomfortable, and the whole thing was actually quite brilliant. I'm grateful it all happened on Vancouver Island, quite a beautiful location. I'm grateful how peaceful it was too. In general, that it happened in BC and it was an adventure. But what was hard in the moment was the desire to recluse away from people and society, but still be with them and impact them spiritually. Like I had these dual messages: remove yourself while simultaneously try to be a light to people. And because I didn't really know how to do that, I just moved more into social isolation. So, feeling the desire to explore Vancouver Island north, I drove back up. So, eventually, I spent time in Ladysmith, which is along here. I remember doing that for a couple days. And then it was as I was coming back up to Nanaimo, I was running out of money. When I left for traveling, I only had $900. Now, about maybe a month in, I was starting to be unclear what to do, especially after random expenses like injuring myself and needing to rent crutches. My story has an interesting relationship with the human concept of visioning, about thoughts that can manifest our circumstances. I had a dream about visioning right before I found the HG book. HG themselves also talked about using thoughts to create our circumstances. And so now, with the book Conversations with God articulating clearly how to vision, what I did was attempt to exercise this visioning power within me. So, between gas, food, books, and crutches, I was now running low on money. I had learned the technique of visioning, and now it was time to apply it. I needed this to work because I was actually unclear what to do if it didn't. My life wasn't making any sense, but I was certain I wasn't put into this scenario to starve. So, believing my thoughts have the power to create, I created a vision of myself having money. So, to get to that space, you have to take a responsibility that your thoughts actually have the ability to create. So, it's a change of reference inside that I am a creator and I actually have this ability, and that my thoughts are kind of God powers in some way, and I need to be responsible for them. So, I saw in my mind how I would be acting if I had money, what I'd be thinking if I had money, what I'd be saying if I had money. And I realized I would be relaxed. I wouldn't actually be thinking about money. I would just be chilling out. And so I would keep traveling. And that's basically what I did. I kept traveling and exploring like I was. I held that feeling, living in the present moment that I actually had money, and then acted like I had it. So I didn't go trying looking for work. I didn't do anything. I just kept traveling. So this is the park. This is the park I was staying at in Nanaimo, and here I was keeping my car in one of these parking spots here. Now, yeah. So basically, I recall being here. I recalled being at this park in Nanaimo 3 or 4 days later, where I got a flash from my heart to call my mom. It was like a clear intuition. I wasn't calling my parents, and no one knew where I was, and no one knew what was going on with me. They were all kind of scared for me, and I was like, too bad. I'm on a spiritual mission. That's how I treated it at the time. Later, I felt bad for that, and I did eventually apologize. I apologized to my parents, but at the time, I was trying to avoid people and avoid connecting with people and be detached, like the HG talked about. So, ridding myself of my humanity. But this feeling came up to call my mom. So I listened to it and called her at the payphone. At first, she mentioned how she was concerned for me, but was generally happy that everything was okay with me. So then, casually, she tells me that I have a $2,000 tax return coming back to me. I was blown away. For me, the way it all flowed, I knew it was from visioning. I listened to myself, and then I had an intuition and followed it. I had money, and I couldn't even believe it. $2,000. In this state I was in, it would last me a long time. It would last me months. It was so much money. This made me feel like the universe was 100% on my side. God was literally behind me and was aware of my experience and was with me on my travels. I was like, this is real. Like the way it kind of formed in my head, right? This is real. This is absolutely real. And it put me in this space where I felt this kind of spiritual freedom, this high spiritual freedom that the universe was with me and that I was protected and I could rely and I could feel my intuition and I would be guided. It gave me confidence for what was going on with me. So I spent money on upgrading all my equipment. I got a large 70-pound backpack, a small camping stove, water filter, waterproof clothing, and a warm sleeping bag. I upgraded myself and I felt good. So, another story I want to talk about. So, when I was in Nanaimo, I went into a spiritual bookstore. Speaking with an employee, I shared my spiritual awakening experience with her. Intrigued, she suggested I return that night when the bookstore was closed, as they had a spiritual meeting where I could share my story. That night, I showed up. In the back of the bookstore, there were 5 people around a table. Each got a turn to talk, and eventually I told them my story. And they were all very intrigued and very interested and encouraging. It was really sweet. When it was over, I walked out with one of the men, and he was really curious about what this was all about. And how did this spiritual awakening happen to you? As I was talking to him, I could feel something was in the night sky, and I could feel I was being watched. I could feel it was interested in our conversation. I could literally feel at that moment something was in the sky. And I knew when I really zeroed in on the feeling, I knew it was the feeling of the faceless presence that was associated with the rising. While talking with him, I kept looking up at the sky. Like I was talking and then I'd look up, talking and I'd look up. And I kept looking up into this specific spot. I could feel something was up there. And so I kept talking to him, but kept looking up. But he wasn't really paying attention to it. But it stuck with me because now I fully believe, from having the memories exposed and knowing what the entities are able to do, it was the elder in a craft, and I believe it anyway, just intuitively. Like she sits in a phased craft that doesn't affect the environment, so I couldn't hear it. Quietly watching, listening, observing what I was saying and how I'm talking about the rising and talking about the experience, talking about it, how I processed it, and how it impacts other people. Maybe it was her just in ethereal form, ghost form, if you will, but the presence in the sky felt larger than that. Like it was a craft, but I don't really know. So while I was in Nanaimo, I actually stayed on the couch of a friend for a night. She was a spiritual woman whose name was Deja. She was the one who told me about Hornby Island. Hornby Island is right here. So this was Nanaimo. This is Nanaimo. And this is Hornby Island over here. And it's on the coast. It's a beautiful island, just a gorgeous spot. And it's got a high energy as well, too. Deja is the one who informed me that it's best to leave your car behind and hitchhike on the island, as it took two ferries to get there, and people in the community were accustomed to hitchhikers getting rides on the island from the ferry. I saw it as a great opportunity to fulfill that vision I initially had before I left, that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. That pure childlike, pure energy vision from my heart, right? That one that bursted forth of me just living out of my backpack, and that's all I owned, right? So for me, it's a big part of the story that I had this very powerful spiritual vision, and then when fulfilling it, that was the location of a contact event, right? So it just shows the beings intertwining with my consciousness, interpreted as a part of my personal spirituality. And the answer is because I experienced my oversoul on craft and the dimensional body now in me. So there is some type of smooth, easy linkage between my own personal intuition and it having, it driving me towards contact. And I can only assume the elder being linked to me adds to this. So in my mind, in the moment, I was just trying to listen to myself and fulfill what was in me, fulfill this energy, whatever it was wanting in me, and I was trying to answer to it. So I ditched my car in Buckley Bay, and I basically just went over with a sleeping bag, my camping stove, some food, and a tent, and my new backpack. This here is Buckley Bay, and you take a ferry to Denman, and then you take a ferry to Hornby Island. So the first night, I slept on the beach on the east side of Denman, so this side here. And it was somewhere along here that I slept on the beach that night. And this is the general location of where it would have been. It was rugged and dark and rough and amazing, and it felt crazy and beautiful and felt powerful, and I just loved it so much. Right, you're on the edge, and you're in this just a gorgeous location, very powerful. And then the next day, I made my way to Hornby Island. So this here was Denman, and I made my way to Hornby Island. Now, Hornby Island is known for having these amazing beaches, Tribune Bay Beach, and that's what these pictures are here. It's a unique location with its own fauna, being in a dry belt in the Georgia Strait. And when you look at geomagnetic maps on BC, there is an anomaly underneath. The UFO BC database has several reports of people seeing orbs out here. Some have seen red objects out here, just like myself. So it kind of is a magical island. In those days, you could just camp on the beach. You can't do that anymore, as these are provincial parks, so someone will kick you out. But at the time, it was really rugged and no one cared. And so, what I did was I camped right here. Let's zoom in. And I actually camped right there. And this is the location of my eighth contact event. Contact event number 8, Hornby Island, April 1998, 20 years old.